All right, we are recording and we are on our way. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Donny Lowry,
And I'm crying.
and we are delighted to host another episode of Queer Tribes Conversations with gay luminaries and thought leaders. And today we are delighted to have with us Bobby Jo Valentine. Hi, Bobby Jo, how are you doing?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Excellent, excellent. Well, as I said, we're delighted to have you here. Uh, uh, Bobby Joe is a fascinating, interesting man. You're going to find out much more about him. But before we get into our conversation, I'll give you a little intros to give you a little context about Bobby Joe. And so let's find out a little bit. So, Bobby Joe Valentine is an explorative, hopeful, spiritual, queer artist who strives to make music and poetry that is good medicine for everyone. Bobby Joe has won multiple awards for his songwriting, even given a TEDx talk, and is a believer in the soft and steady power of tiny, everyday acts of love to heal our world. His new book, Your True Name, is a collection of 112 stories, poems, and lyrics around coming home to yourself. And his latest album, The Thing About a Heart, explores human behavior and belonging in our confusing modern world. When he's not touring the country extensively, he lives in Portland, Oregon with his husband, Tim, and their puppy, Kizzy. Oh, I love the puppy.
Great, great.
So welcome, Bobby Joe.
Yeah, so welcome
Thank you. My
aboard. And
pleasure.
yeah. So as I alluded, we're going to invite you into sharing your journey, basically what the next 45 minutes is all about. So tell us, Bobby Joe, about your spiritual awakenings, kind of what those paths look like, what those experiences. Tell us stories so that we kind of lean into this is what woke you up, and how we might resonate with that. Go for it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, all right. Well, I grew up in a really, really conservative religious home. Like I think a lot of queer folks share that history.
Mhm.
But my particular sect of religion was Independent Fundamental Baptist.
Oh yeah.
Um, what I like to tell people is that it's kind of like Westboro Baptist Church light. So, um, we didn't hold up signs on the street corners telling everyone they were going to burn in hell forever or anything. We just believed it quietly in our hearts.
Mm, mm.
And that was just as bad, when we had a worldview that was like we're the special ones, we're the ones that get to go to heaven and live there forever when we die, and then everyone that believes anything slightly different than us is going to go to hell. Um, First off, looking back on it, it was a pretty arrogant worldview. But second off, it was really anxious. It was a very like anxious worldview because you were
Yeah.
told that you needed to proselytize and try to get everyone to come onto your side of things, and that if you didn't, then you were guilty for them going to hell. And so it was kind of a heavy world. All of our edges were really sharp for people that didn't belong in our culture. And but it was like a warm, kind of a warm, friendly center for everyone that, prayed the prayers we wanted them to pray and all that stuff. So I grew up in that world and it was really tight knit. I was a part of this Baptist culture for school from kindergarten through 12th grade. So there was a private Christian school that I went to from kindergarten through 12th grade in Rohnert Park, California, which is 45 minutes north of the Golden Gate Bridge, if anyone doesn't know where that's at.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's kind of all that I knew for a really long period in my life. When I was growing up, though, I had a wonderful children's librarian that kind of caught on to the culture that I was a part of and realized that I was a part of a really kind of a closed-minded culture. And so she figured that out and she started recommending me these books. And these books kind of helped open my mind up to a bigger world than I was growing up in. And it was like when I was, so I read voraciously when I was young. I just read like crazy. And it was like each of these books was like this window into a world that was different, than the one I was growing up in, but full of good people trying to do their best. And it really helped challenge my small worldview that I was growing up in. When we grew up, we were told, of course, that everyone that, was born again, that, prayed this special sinner's prayer were the good people, and that everyone that hadn't done that yet were living in sin and were, filled with guilt all the time. And um, if they seemed nice, or they seemed good, or they seemed peaceful, that was just a show they were putting on. That pretty much no one outside of our little tribe, our Baptist tribe, were were good, essentially.
Mm,
And
mm,
and I was really lucky to have that challenge when I was early on, when I was a young kid, through these books I was reading. And they were just full of people that were, like I said, doing the best they could and capable of great good and great kindness that weren't necessarily a part of our faith.
mhm,
So that had a really deep impact on me, kind of opening me up into this larger world. And I didn't really notice how great the impact was until I came out of that world.
mm,
Um, when I had a brother that was 2 years older than me, and we were both adopted.
Hmm.
And so we were adopted, he was adopted, I think, 4 days after he was born, and I was adopted 2 days after I was born. And because of that, I think I always had this sense of um, not really belonging where I was growing up. I didn't meet my birth mother until much later in life. And so I loved my parents very much, but I never really felt like I always had this doubt of whether or not I fit in. And I think that resulted in me trying to prove myself, or overprove myself,
mm,
to fit in.
mm.
And I know that there's a there's a book that that's about that's about gay men, and it's called The Best Little Boy in the World.
Yeah,
Have you heard
yeah,
that book?
Oh, I read that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's really, really powerful. And of course, it's just that, that sense of feeling different causes a lot of gay men to overcorrect and to become, you know, overachievers in the name of masking for the
Yeah.
fact that, they don't really fit in, that they're different. Um, and of course, I think that everyone fits in now. I feel like everyone belongs, and that's part of the journey, is realizing, like, I'm home right here. I'm
Mm,
held right
mm,
here, and I'm
mhm,
okay right here.
mhm.
Um, but it took me a little while to get there. And so when my brother was older, my brother's 2 years older, when he went out of high school, he got pretty rebellious, like teenagers do. And he got into the, whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll culture. And so I like to joke with him that he took the rebellious role away. So because he was the rebellious one, I didn't feel like I could be the rebellious one. I
Mm,
felt like I had to, of course, this was all in my head, but I felt like I had to do exactly what mom and dad wanted, because they were, already struggling with my brother. So when they wanted me to go to Bible college right after high school, I decided, yes, I would do it. And I graduated pretty early, so I went to college, Bible college, 2 weeks after I turned 17. And my parents drove me to the middle of the desert in Lancaster, California, to this private college of like 800 and something folks, still in this Baptist world. And then they drove away and left me there. And so for 4 years, I trained in this college, and it was a very intense college, very intense culture. Although the women couldn't wear pants, it was only skirts. The men had to wear suits. 5 days out of the week, we had to wear suits. And the other days, it was dress shirts, very strict uniform. And I remember when I first got there, when I was thinking of going, and I was looking at the college when I was in high school, I asked them if I could bring my skateboard. And I wanted one thing that was mine, and so I asked them if I could bring the skateboard to this Bible college, and they were like, "Oh yeah, sure, we have rollerbladers. I don't think it'll be a problem for you to have a skateboard." And so I got there to Bible college, and I was the only one with a skateboard. And I would skateboard to class, and I would, just do all this stuff. And then 2 weeks later in chapel, they had an announcement in front of everybody, and they were like, "We're making it official, new rule, no more skateboards." And so, and it was really funny because I was, it was, I was attending this chapel, and it was all these college students,
Oh,
and I'm new, and I'm trying to belong, and I'm trying to fit in. And of course, everyone knew who the skateboarder was
right.
that
You
was
got
in trouble.
singled out. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So growing up in that world, of course, there was the pressure not to be singled out. And the more that you were to fit in first before you were to excel. And
Mm.
you could excel in being a pastor, you could excel in being a missionary, you could excel in being a music director. But in the college I went to, there wasn't any liberal arts. So you couldn't really
Mm.
go for any other degree other than being some sort of a Baptist minister.
Mm.
Uh, and so it was like I said, very constrictive culture, and it was all that I knew. But I'm so lucky again that art seemed to call to me, and it seemed to offer me this bigger spirit. And I felt this deeper, more universal, more wide open truth coming from the music that I was listening to, that some friends turned me on to, that wasn't, Baptist, but was very soulful and very spiritual. Bands like Nickel Creek, and some early 90s bands, even like Everclear, and just really were influential to me in opening up this world.
Mhm.
And I'll never forget that when I was in college, a friend of mine was like, "I really need you to hear this song." And I was like, "Okay, well, that sounds fun." He's like, "Well, we need to get in a car and leave the college because we'd get in trouble if someone heard us playing this song at the college." And I was like, "Oh, okay, what kind of song is this?"
Yeah.
So we got in his car, and we drove 2 miles out into the middle of the desert. And so we're in the middle of the Southern California desert, nothing but stars above us in his car. And he pushes play on the CD player of his car, and Defying Gravity from the musical Wicked comes on.
Oh yeah. Oh my, yeah.
And that, when I think about spiritual awakening, I feel like I was given these little windows into this larger spiritual world, into these deeper spiritual truths. Um, all throughout my life, I feel like Source is always calling us, into deeper love, into bigger truth. But that was the first time when I heard that song, and I heard the line, "Something has changed within me. Something has got to change. I'm tired of playing by the rules of someone else's game."
Yes.
It really opened my heart,
Mm.
and something inside me just expanded.
Mhm.
Um, because I realized that maybe the reason I wasn't fitting in, it wasn't that I was wrong. It was that the game I was playing wasn't a fit for me. And the game that I was playing was someone else's game.
Mhm.
And all these sets of rules,
Mm.
it really helped me to think about, like, are these sets of rules I'm living by, are they really God's rules, or are they rules that someone else set up a long time ago, and are we just kind of following them because it's someone else's game we've agreed to?
Yeah.
And that really helped set the stage for me, later on, to come out and to try to start living a true life.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, so that's kind of a big piece of what helped me wake up. And but I didn't fully, like, I didn't, leave college after hearing that song. I didn't go home and be like, okay, everything's changed. And I was still in that world, and I was on track to be a pastor. I had gotten I went to 4 years of that school, and I got my pastoral theology degree. And this is another thing that I feel so lucky. Like I feel like I have been guided throughout my life, because after finishing that degree in college, I could have gone on to be a minister at a Baptist church, and those responsibilities could have eaten me up, and I could still be in the closet today. Um, but I was so lucky that after I went out to college, I got invited to be a music minister at a church.
Mhm.
So once I finished college, I got invited to be a music minister at this church in Erie, Pennsylvania, the complete other side of the country. And lake effect snow, 2 feet of snow in a typical, winter day, and just kind of a really interesting place to live. But the thing that was such a gift coming out into that world is that um, I was encouraged to do music. And even though it was, still in this Baptist world, I could kind of set the tone and make the musical choices for this church. And I was put in a situation where I could explore a little bit. And I could explore my spirituality. I could explore lyrics that resonated with me more than others. And and I kept seeing that, like, the the songs that would resonate with me, and the songs that I would want to choose, and that I kept gravitating toward, were these more open-hearted songs. They weren't the songs that were wrapped around the idea that our religion is the way.
Mhm.
A song that we would sing in the Baptist world would be like, "Nothing but the blood of Jesus." What can make me whole again?
Yeah.
Nothing but the blood of Jesus. So just, let's put aside that that's really creepy. That's just a really creepy idea.
Mm.
But it's also very, like, tribal in a restrictive way. You know what I mean? Like, nothing's gonna fix me except our religion. That's I wouldn't resonate with those songs. Instead, I would resonate with um there's a song by Kristen Getty called "Don't Let Me Lose My Wonder." And it's just so beautiful, and it's about the glory of spirituality being something that you can't explain, and being awestruck. And that I gravitated towards that song. I gravitated towards other songs that were just more expansive. So yeah, when I was a music director there, it kind of opened my eyes a little bit. And then it kind of got a little, like, there was a it's kind of a long and winding road to coming out. But basically, I got to a point where the music director job wasn't going to work out anymore, and I had to face and figure out what I was going to do with my life now that that door had closed. So for a little bit, I was like, I headed out towards um, being a missionary in Uganda, East Africa, and I wandered
Wow.
around the country trying to raise support to be a missionary. And I'm so glad that didn't work out, because I could be over there once again in the closet, and trying to get people to pray a prayer for the rest of my life,
Wow.
um, instead of where I'm at now. So that didn't work out. And after that didn't work out, I was given the gift of a liminal space. I was given the gift of finally coming to a point in my life around 22 where I didn't have anything on the horizon for me, and there wasn't any clear step of what to do next. And it turns out I really needed that. I really needed that liminal space. I needed that moment of being in between things
Mhm.
without a clear direction,
Mhm.
because it allowed me, and I wonder if other people will resonate with this, but being in that liminal space invited me to tap into my own inner knowing.
Mhm.
And it was a moment for me to stop doing what everyone else wanted me to do.
Yeah.
And that list had dried up, of doing what everyone wanted me to do. And I was finally left with the feeling of an open horizon of, like, where do I want to go? I get to choose.
Mm.
Um, and so I started asking myself, well, what would I want to do with my life? And the one thing that I had been closeted about my whole life, of course, was my sexuality.
Mhm.
All along the way, I developed crushes. I always liked older guys, and I would have these attractions to, you know, people like, of course, the older guys in my school were like the dean of men at the college, or like things like that. I would think they were handsome, and I would fantasize about them, but of course, I'd be filled with such shame.
Mm.
Uh, to we were told that any sex was bad, of course, before marriage, but especially, of course, to be attracted to the same sex. That was the one of the quote unquote worst things you could be in the world that I grew up in.
Mhm.
Um, and so it took me, like I said, getting to that point where there was no prospects in my future and nothing, no clear prospects or clear direction in my future, to finally tap into me and figure out, what do I want to do? And so when I was 22, I kind of let myself be honest about my desire for to be with guys. And I had my first sexual relationship with a guy when I was 22. And talk about a spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time that you open your heart up to another human being in
Yeah.
that intimate encounter is very spiritual.
Yeah.
Um, and if it's done with someone that has care and about the connection between two people, then you definitely tap into this other realm of the idea that there's the two of you, right, that are connecting intimately. But for me anyway, there's something greater going on too. Like you're tapping into this egoless connectivity to the person and also to this greater thing that's going on. Um, and so that really helped break me out into the wider world. Um, and but of course, for a little while, I was, ridden with guilt and shame, like most people that are in these conservative cultures. You know, that happens to us when we first have our sexual experiences. And so I came out to my parents, and I came out to just a few people, like my best friend at the time and my parents. And my parents, when they found out, they wanted me to go to reform school. So that was, the reparative therapy, to go get myself fixed. And I almost went. Um, there was like this feeling that I'll lose all my friends and family if I came out and decide to, be honest about who I was. And so I could go to this place, and I was old enough to know that, like, it's probably just brainwashing. Like I didn't think that I didn't think it actually fixed people. But I did think to myself, well, if I got brainwashed, then I could keep all my friends and family, and I wouldn't lose this whole world
Mm.
that I grew up in.
Mm.
So I almost went, and I'm so lucky that I was visiting my parents for Christmas and made this decision that I was going to have one more fling, and then I was going to go to reform school. And so I put out an ad. At the time, the way that you found guys, we didn't have any apps on our phone or anything.
Yeah.
We just had Craigslist.
Right.
And so I put on an ad on Craigslist. It's so funny because later on I looked at the ads for Craigslist that people put out, and they're a lot more clear about what they want. There's like a couple X-rated pictures, and here's what I like in sex and everything like that. And my ad was like, I'm looking for an older gentleman, gray beard, a plus, for a pleasant and it was like a thesis, like a college thesis. But that's all I didn't know anything else. So I put out the ad, and a couple of people responded, and one of them that responded was a really, really sweet guy. And I said, okay, great, I'll meet you. And so I went to his house, and I almost didn't go through the gate because I was so, like, of course, like, ridden with guilt, and felt the pressure of, like, what if I just left and just went to reform school and didn't have this final fling? What if I just do that? But thankfully, I went through the gate, knocked on the door, he opened the door, and he was so sweet. And we went and sat on his couch, and I told him everything. I told him, of course I didn't have anyone else to talk to. So I just like, and this poor guy that was like there just for, just for a fling with a younger guy. I ended up spilling my whole guts out to him and saying, I hate to tell you this, but I'm about to go to reform school. This is kind of my last night. And all this, just all this angst and pain, just kind of told him everything. And he had his arm around me on the couch, and he just when I ended the story, he just had this little smile on his face. And when I ended the story, he just said, "You're going to be okay." And the gift of in that moment when I felt like the only way to be okay was to compromise myself and who I was as a human, who I was as a spirit, the gift of someone saying, "You're going to be okay."
Yeah.
And saying it so confidently and with such surety and sweetness and firmness for someone to know something about me that I didn't know about myself. That you are going to figure this out and you are going to be okay. It was just what I needed to hear. And so suffice to say, I fell hopelessly in love with this person. And he ended up being my partner of over 8 years.
Oh, lovely.
So once I met him, it was like, before I'd met him, the argument in the Christian world was like, well, um, it's lust. All homosexual attraction is lust, not love. That was their argument. That's what they would tell me. Um, and for I hadn't fallen in love with anyone before, and so that argument had worked on me because I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe that's all it is lust. And then I met John and I fell in love. And love is the great, that's my, if I have any theology, it's the idea that God is love. I think it's the supreme force. I think it's the central force. I think it's the force that moves, that moves, brings us together and then moves us out into the world to help more people. I'm all about that. And so when I experienced love for the first time, the kind of love that makes you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, it was really clear that that was the strongest, like that was the strongest picture of God that I'd ever had in my life. That was the strongest image of a holy other. Because the love that I had for John didn't just make me like want to hang out with him and have him be a part of my life. It actually made me a better person. Like I was kinder because I had this love in my life. I wanted more love in the world because I had this love in my life. Like it was a really powerful force for me. And you talk about awakening, like a powerful awakening for me to experience that love. I know we're already at half an hour here, so I'll shorten the rest of it, which is I went back to Pennsylvania, but had totally fallen in love with this guy. So for 6 months, I would fly out every 2 weeks to be with him in California. And for someone that was not rich, that was like, I'm still amazed that I did that. A plane ticket every 2 weeks, but I was happy to do it because we were in love. And 6 months later, I flew him out to Pennsylvania and we packed everything I owned into my 1998 Oldsmobile Achieva, and we took an 8-day road trip / honeymoon back from Pennsylvania to California. And it was wonderful. Just so many good memories from that. And then I ended up moving in with him. So he, I would get out my guitar and play every now and then at his house. And he was the one that really helped encourage me that like, hey, this you should do this for more than just fun. Like this, you should share this with other people. And so he really helped see my calling in the world before I could see that. And he encouraged me so I started writing songs to figure out the world. He encouraged me to go to an open mic one day, local to our house. It was like 4 blocks away. And we get there at the open mic, and whoops, it's a songwriting contest, not an open mic. And so I don't know if he knew or not, but regardless, he was like, well, if we're here, you might as well just play one of your songs. I mean, we're here anyway. So I played one of my songs at this songwriting competition, and it was lucky enough to win. And it didn't come with any big, thank you. It didn't come with any big fan base or anything or a big cash prize, but what it did for me was give me this sense of like, oh, what you do is connecting with people. There's something here that's real, that's working, and maybe you want to pursue this. So I did, and I started writing more songs, and I started playing more places. And before I knew it, I started touring. I released my first album in 2011, and things just kind of kept building from there. I was so lucky to um, start being able to do this full time in 2012, and just just have loved this new world that I've been able to enjoy with music. I've found a new family with music. You know, music put me on stage at Pride festivals. So I found this wonderful queer family that would open their arms and celebrate what I do. And then lo and behold, as I kept sharing my music, these wonderful, open-hearted, gay-friendly churches started inviting me to perform at their churches. And I never thought I'd be back in church, especially since, I'd come from such a closed-minded culture and experienced so much pain after I came out. But I got invited back to these open, safe, queer, friendly spaces, spiritual spaces all over the country. And I fell in love with the people that were, you know, a part of these communities. And so now that's almost all that I do. I play Pride festivals still, I play folk festivals still, I play theaters and clubs, but I get to play these amazing gay friendly churches all over the country, and I get to be with people that value spirituality, and I get to explore what what I believe about the world and what I'm learning about the world, which is a much more, my spirituality is always expansive. I'm always learning more, um, in a safe space, in a space where that I'll be celebrated for that and not get in trouble for my questions or my explorations. Um, so yeah, that's kind of bring it to now. I was so lucky that my first partner and I split up amicably about 6 years ago, and a year later, I was lucky to meet my husband Tim, and we dated for a little while, and then last year in October, actually October 15th, will be our 1 year anniversary. We got married. Yeah. So now I'm married, and we have a little puppy, and I tour all over the country about maybe a third of the year I'm on tour, traveling around the country. And then when I'm home and loving life and just enjoying just the everyday, gift of being here and being alive.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, and thank you for I mean, your story. I'm excited for other people to hear your story who have not heard it, because I think just so many folks, no matter what tradition they may have been, their formations were in, few of us grew up in spaces where oh, we're so glad you're queer and we want to celebrate that, and how can we help plan your first wedding, that didn't happen for most of us. So so what I hear in your story is that you just kept going inside, but the other agent from the outside was that people saw you, from the guy in the car that played the Wicked song for you, to meeting the guy who then became your lover, for 8 years. But you got seen, and every time you got seen, you got healed and opened up. Your heart and your life and your purpose just kept unfolding. So what a Jim's story. And I know there are probably 1,000 more layers that we could if we had time, but maybe another call.
Yeah.
Great, great. With that as a foundation, though, let's talk about the queer tribe. Obviously these calls are called queer tribe conversations, and do you see us as a queer tribe, or how do you see us as a queer tribe, or as I even referred earlier, that maybe there are attributes that you see. It's kind of like people seeing you, that you see the tribe has, that would be informative from your viewpoint. So jump in, however that made sense as a question um,
Yeah.
about your tribe.
Yeah. I I wrote a poem a little while ago
Mm,
that was called The Tribeless Tribe.
mm,
And there's a little thing, you you are not the top of the line, the top line of the poem says, you are not uniquely broken, unusually shattered by life's hammer hand.
mm,
And the poem is about the fact that one of the uniting things that humanity experiences is suffering,
yeah,
is going through difficult times.
mm,
And I feel like the queer tribe, we've experienced things that we wouldn't wish on anyone. Some of the pain that we've had to go through, some of the anxiety and separation, but it also gives us the gift, if we receive it right, of empathy,
yeah,
of understanding that to be human is to experience pain. And the one thing that we might be diverse in all sorts of different, colors, languages, gender norms and things like that. But the one thing we have experienced as queer people, one of the things that almost all of us have in common is that we've been through some really difficult things. And we've experienced some deep suffering and deep loss and
yeah,
had to travel through that, and not just travel through that, but to find our joy on the other side of that, and
yeah,
our belonging and our community.
yeah,
And so I do feel like there is a queer tribe, and I'm so grateful to belong to a family of people around the country that are queer and that love me for me, and I get to love them back. And at the same time, I think, every tribe is not without its struggles.
yeah,
And I think the queer community is just as with any community can struggle with um, specialness, with trying to kind of pull away from the tribe and be like, no, over here, what I'm going through is different than what you're going through,
uh,
and can struggle with those kinds of things. This weird, sometimes there can be a weird sense of superiority that comes into play of, no, I've struggled more than you've struggled. You don't understand me at all. And so the thing that gives me hope is when people put those temptations aside and decide to find out what we have in common
yeah,
more than what we have different.
yeah,
And so I feel like the tribeless tribe is that's what means a lot to me. When I think of the queer tribe, I think of people that might have all sorts of different things about them, but unite based on our
yeah.
shared experiences.
I'm curious, since you said that though, are there things, are there attributes? It's kind of like when I think about different tribes of people, whether it's about gender or sexual orientation or race, or all the kind of groupings that we think of as kind of tribal collectives. But many of them uh, have not stereotypic, but have kind of underpinning gifts that they offer. Are there like common gifts or attributes that you have observed in your life and your journey of us as the queer tribe, that we may bring to the table, knowing that we need every tribe to bring all the gifts to the table for wholeness to happen?
Mm, yeah. Well, I think one of those is what I mentioned, which is a shared sense of suffering and the empathy that can come from that.
Yes.
Um, Radical acceptance is another gift that I'd say we were given as people that grew up in a world where we were different. Now it's more important than ever. We know the need to tell people just as you are is good, just as you are is loved. At your core, you're beautiful. And I think that's an idea that makes our a gift that makes our queer tribes unique.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier when we were talking, you mentioned bridge building. And while I while like I say, I do think we struggle a little bit with that sometimes. I do think we do have a unique opportunity
Yeah.
to know the value of connection because many of us have been separated from the people that we grew up with because of who we are. So we know how valuable it is to connect and build bridges instead of burn them down.
Mhm.
So that, yeah, that feels like an important quality too. But when I think of it, the first thing I thought of was radical acceptance. That's,
Great, great. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, and on the calls that we've done over the past 10 years, I mean, much of the gist of what I've heard and that we've experienced in our own communities is that we as queer people oftentimes are kind of reversalist. It's kind of the Isaiah scripture, get us back to the Bible again. But that the mountains and the valleys they come together and even out. So we lift up the people who have been disenfranchised or have the opportunity because we came from every tribe, every race, every culture. So there's a way in which we have an opportunity to lift everybody up because it really kind of is in our queer DNA. Um, but anyway, that's part of my
I love that. That's beautiful.
thought, yeah, as well. So again, we could play with this for hours, and I would love to, but at least you got us cooking. Now let's go to the last question, which is so if we are a queer tribe and we have gifts that are unique to each one of us, but maybe kind of tribal gifts that we all share. What's your vision for us as a tribe? What's your vision for us as a movement? What do you see our work to be? If you're being prophetic, if you're being a seer, if your heart is speaking to you, what's without a vision the people perish. So what's your vision that's going to bring life for us?
Hmm. Well, I feel like there are so much of life is how you look at it. And so much of life is what you're choosing to see.
Yeah.
Um, and it's so much of it is a choice, we choose what we focus on. We choose whether to celebrate or to, over focus on the suffering and the sorrow and the darkness of the world. And instead of having a motivation to do something about it, it can be easy to use that as a reason to stay cloistered in our shell and stay protected in our echo chambers and to stay with people who agree with us. Um, but I think that once you've tasted the joy of radical acceptance and the joy that comes after suffering, uh, the growth of humor, the sense of humor that can come after suffering, things like that,
Mm.
then
Mm.
there is this definite choice that am I gonna drown in the suffering and the difficulty of the world, or am I going to, say, oh man, this is dark, so I'm gonna shine even brighter. Um,
Mm.
and man, people are being shut down, so I'm gonna make sure and lift them up.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like the when I see a vision of a queer tribe, I see like a tribe that is active in its defiant joy and radical acceptance, and not passive and not defined by like our stances and what we think about the world. That's all great. That's all good, and you have to start there. But I really do think the one thing I've kept, I've kept a couple things, but one thing that I've kept from my growing up is the idea that by your fruits you'll know them.
Yes.
The idea that we're known by the actual results of what our lives are bringing to the world, and not just what we say, but what we do, and the effect that we're having on the world, the fruit that our tree is bearing. And so that when I see a vision, or am invited to cast a vision for our tribe, I think that that's my vision, is to be an active force of good in the world, and not a passive, not kind of wait for things to happen to us. But I have a line in a song that says, life isn't just what happens, it's something you happen to. And I
Mm,
think that so much of this world is telling us that we're victims of our circumstances, we're victims of whatever. And of course, they just do that to sell us their next product. But the truth is that we are the authors of our life, and we can help author this world too. And I think it's the Queer Tribe's calling to take our pen and actually tell the story of a beautiful world where everyone's equal, where everyone's celebrated, where everyone's accepted, and where there's less suffering.
wow. Wow. Beautiful. I love that vision.
Hmm.
Um, and it looks like our beloved is gone that was with us.
No, he's still
Oh,
there.
he's still there.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's there.
Okay. So uh are there are there things that you want to plug before we open the line to Robert and see if he has a comment or a question for you? But is there anything you want to plug before we close our time as well? Like I know
Sure,
you've got a
yeah.
zillion places. In fact, I was so absolutely curious today when I saw all the places, including where I went to a Bible college for a year and a half in Joplin, Missouri. And I thought, you're going to Joplin, Missouri?
Oh
Really?
my goodness, I love it.
Oh my goodness. So anyway, but anything you want to plug before we open the line and see if Robert has anything he wants to share from hearing you?
Sure. There's three things I'd mention. One of them is I have a new music video for a song that I wrote called You'd Call Me Up, and it's just about mental health awareness. And so if there's anyone that's ever struggled with mental health, or knows a loved one that struggled, they might get something out of that. So that's something they can find on YouTube. There's a website. My website is bobbyjovalentine.com. There's no E in the Joe, and I'm playing all over the country pretty consistently, so they can find out my shows on there and also explore more music and find out more about me. And the one thing I'd say about that website, and also for people that want to just support me as an artist, is that there's a website called Patreon. And that's one where people can be patrons of the arts for whatever amount they want, and they
Great,
get kind of exclusive access to songs and things like that. So those
great.
are the three things that I'd mention.
Excellent. Thank you. And what wonderful gifts for people to be able to access. All right, Robert, if you're still there, any thoughts, questions, or comments before we close up our time? And you're our
I put the
solo
question
audience
in the
tonight. So
chat.
what's that?
I put the question in the chat.
Oh, in
Oh,
the
in the
chat.
chat. Okay. And
Let's see
I
if I
didn't
can
know.
get it.
there we
Doesn't the
go.
chat thing sometimes come up?
Oh, okay, I see. Your puppy, I see. When did your music art start? Playing the guitar? Was it grade school, middle school, high school, or college? When did you start to do music, I guess
There we go.
Yeah, I started playing piano when I was 8 or 9 years old, took a little lessons, and then of course dropped it like most kids did when we got bored. And then when I went to college, I asked my parents for a guitar, and they got me a guitar right before I left for college. So that was where I started learning music, and I was terrible at it at first. And so I would play in my little college dorm really loudly on Sunday afternoons. And there was a guy that worked security at nights, and so I'd keep him up. I didn't know that I was keeping him up, but I would keep him up on Sunday afternoons with my bad guitar playing. And one day he opened the door to his dorm room and he threw a book at me, and it hit me in the face. And I looked down, and the book was How to Play the Guitar. And so that book, I taught myself how to play the guitar using that book, and that was kind of how everything started.
Yeah,
You must have
the wondrous ways.
mathematical.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say you might, Bobby Joe, you must have some mathematical skills because a lot of music is math.
Yeah.
And so did you have that also as a kid? Did you know you always kind of liked music even after the piano? Was there something sort of calling you, or I was just
Yeah,
curious?
I loved it. I love music always, and I think that I loved especially the storytelling that comes with a good song. So when I think of mathematics and how that compares to my brain, I guess I would say that I love making connections, and I love making connections and relationships between two different things, just like two different numbers, how two different words or a phrase or a sentence can have an impact on somebody just by how they're combined. So I fell in love with it that way, with a line of surprise or a line of that can move people. I really fell in love with that process, finding those lines.
Right. Robert, thank you. Those were good questions. We got little snippets
Yeah.
of your journey
And a
as
fun
well.
story.
And a very fun story. Yes, absolutely. So, if whatever you call source, but source threw the book at you.
Right, yes, yeah, for sure.
Here's a manual.
Exactly.
I love it. That's great.
Somebody he was listening, and as you were
Yeah.
saying, with the other people that listened to you or could see you or something, there was something like that too. I just don't think everything is
Yeah.
a coincidence.
Yeah.
I have that Catholic spirituality, so to me, these things are just God, carrying you or doing what God does to have you where you are at the moment. So,
Yeah.
they're not like all coincidences to
Yeah.
me, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was just another example of what you had said, people seeing you or
Yeah.
hearing you or whatever. I
Yeah.
don't know that I would have thrown a book at you, as I would have been
Great.
more polite to say, here's a book. But he was listening to you, so it was making it was an impact.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. All right. Well, we are going to have to close our time, and it was great to have kind of a fun story to close with that question. So, Bobby Jo, thank you so much for sharing your story. Know that it will go out shortly to a zillion people, and any way that we can continue to support you, let us know so that we can fan the flames of all the good work that you're doing and spread it around.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, thank you so much, Bobby
Thank
Jo.
you.
Thank you,
And
Robert.
thank you, Robert, for
And
being.
hugs to your puppy.
Puppy, puppy.
Thank you. Yes, he's a dear.
All right.
All right.
Namaste to you all. We'll see you
Namaste.
for our next Queer Tribe call. Many people are lined up, so we'll let you know soon. All right. Good night
Okay.
to you all.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks,
All right.
guys.